This is Dan McCarthy, and you're listening to the Check-In Podcast. So one of the best things I watched recently was this movie called Soul on Disney+. I promise I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, and I'm not going to recap for all the people who have seen it. But for those of you who haven't watched it yet, the whole thesis of this movie boils down to a question of what's most important in life. The movie's director, in a quote I pulled from an Entertainment Weekly article, described the film as an exploration of where should your focus be. What are the things that at the end of the day are really going to be the most important things that you look back on and go, I spent a worthy amount of my limited time on earth worrying or focused on that? I wanted to bring that up because aside from an excuse to mention a pretty entertaining movie, that is one of the major themes of this episode. Taking stock of life and business and putting everything in perspective. It's very clearly a task that is tougher to do than it sounds, and it is something that, in all honesty, I very rarely do. But it's an exercise that's become more important for so many over the past 12 months. I was lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to reconnect with Scott Koepf, one of the first people who I met when I started covering the travel industry. Scott is currently working as Vice President of Strategic Development at Cruise Planners, but when I met him, he was the Senior Vice President of Sales at Avoya, a role he held until moving to Cruise Planners in February 2018. I'll let Scott tell his story in his own voice. One, I'm sure so many of you who have met Scott before will recognize, but his 2020 was certainly more eventful than mine was. He definitely had more to deal with than your average person managing their way through a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And I think his perspective on things is powerful to hear as we move further into 2021. We talk about all that highlighted the last year for him. We also go back to talk about how a 3-month backpacking tour through Europe in his early 20s would land him in the travel industry and where he is in life today, including a short sojourn that he took in Hollywood. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I want to thank you all for joining me today to listen to it as well. So let's check in with Scott.
Mr. Daniel.
Hi, Scott. Nice to see you.
You too. How you doing, buddy?
Good. You look very tan.
Well, I think I don't know what that is. Maybe it's just cold here, and I'll just rub my face here a little bit.
So you're in Southern California, right? Is that right?
Indeed. Yeah.
How are things out there?
Good. We actually moved to a place called. I'm going to change my background here a little bit so I'm not too commercial here for you.
So this is audio only anyway. So.
Oh, it is. Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll do it just for your benefit. There you go.
I appreciate it.
We moved to a place called Temecula. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of the wine district of Southern California down near San Diego.
Yeah, I don't think San Diego's probably not, or I guess around San Diego's probably not the worst place to be, from what I've heard.
We're not complaining. I will tell you flat out, we're not complaining. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I know it's been a while since I think I've seen you. I think the last time I saw you was it had to be 2019 at one of the conventions.
One would think, yeah. I think that was the last year of semi-normalcy when we were all out on the road, right?
Yeah. I think so. I remember the Cruise Planners polo. I think that was your uniform on that day.
Well, always still branded one way or another.
Well, I wanted to sort of take time to check in with you. I know, the last 12 months have been weird for everyone, but I know you had a particularly eventful, I guess the word would be 2020, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your experience the last 12 months.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think everybody's got a story now, right? To go along with this amazing experience we've gone through, from a business perspective or an industry perspective. Obviously, we all have a very strong shared pain, right? That I think, it's kind of like any kind of situation of adversity, that a couple things come from that. One is, I think you find the true character of people. And then the second is that you find the ability and the need to connect with others that are going through the same thing. And we've got, one major support group that the only thing we can't do is sit in a circle and hold hands. But, we have all had to come together. And what has been, extraordinary in so many different ways. And I think that, I've been amazingly impressed with the retail segment in particular, because again, it's primarily made up of small businesses, and it's small businesses and whose cash flow probably more than any other entity has been dramatically affected, and yet continue to plug forward and have a positive attitude and looking towards the future. And again, having been in this career now in this industry for almost 40 years, which is frightening in its own in its own way, that you think you've seen it all, right? You think, oh, well, this is, and at first, when this first happened, and of course, all of us were thinking, well, this is a little glitch. It's, maybe a month, and we were shocked that ships would stop sailing for a month. And you think, well, okay, so let's compare that to, and then you'd find your comparative, right? You'd say, oh, well, that was kind of like, all right, that was kind of like 2008 recession, right? We had a little slowdown, or then as it got a little worse, we go, well, yeah, that was kind of like 9/11, where things. But the truth is, we've never gone through anything like this. This is a whole different world that we're in. So while certainly there were lessons to be learned that we could lean on previous difficulties and tough times, the only thing really we can lean on and count on is each other, and that has been, I think, what has carried us through and is really going to make us even stronger. Of course, being somewhat cliche as we move forward, but I do believe that. And to your point, I decided that challenge wasn't near enough, so yeah, decided to add actually 3 surgeries in 1 year, and the primary one being a brain surgery right in the middle of it, and which was not expected. It was not something that I had planned on. And the interesting thing when I look back on it is I remember having the conversation with Michelle and Vicky, the 2 owners of Cruise Planners, and saying, I'm unfortunately going to have this. And that conversation was about a week before COVID hit, sometime in early March. And I said, I don't have the date exactly, but it's going to happen. And so I'm going to not be able to travel for a couple of months. And obviously I do a lot of travel in what I do, and they were incredibly supportive, and they said, yeah, we get it. No problem. You got to do what you got to do. And, so then the thought was, all right, now I got to start playing around with schedules and who can cover for me here and who can cover for me there. Well, the good Lord, decided, nah, you don't have to worry about that, because ain't nobody going to be traveling for an entire year. So I will say that, maybe the timing ended up being a blessing in that, I really, I was back at work, a month or a week after having brain surgery. But
that is crazy. That is crazy that it was a week between getting brain surgery and getting back to everyday things like that. That just seems so abnormal to me. Like it seems like a fantasy almost.
Well, it was, it's weird. I mean, obviously I was in the hospital for, about 6 days and didn't get a lot done there, I will say. It wasn't a lot of work time there. But once I was home, again, that's one of the benefits of being home now, and that we're all home, is exactly that. I mean, I was able to, obviously it wasn't a full 8-hour day every day at the beginning, but it was, able to get in and kind of dig into work and kind of get back to somewhat normalcy, as all of us have only gotten a certain level of it. But yeah, it added a whole nother layer there. And again, I'm very, very thankful, very blessed with not only, friends and family who were extraordinarily supportive, but the industry too, and knowing that there was a lot of people thinking and praying for me, and it's good. Again, I've come through it. I'm still going to kick around this business for a while, and nobody else would take me at this point. So.
Well, what is the? I mean, what was there any recovery? Was it just, or was your prescription sort of just rest and rest and leisure time, or did you have to do some more active recovery when you have that kind of surgery?
Well, I wish I could tell you that what they told you is make sure you get fat over the next few months here, because that's the one thing I've really done well with. But it is really hard. I mean, I've spent most of my entire life as an ex-athlete, working out on a regular basis, and that being a very normal part of my regime. And of course, with this, and as I mentioned, I had 3 surgeries. I actually had gallbladder surgery before that, had that removed. And so, you had a month or two where they say, oh, well, you can't, no exercise, basically, nothing, heavy to recover from that. And then from the brain surgery, same kind of thing. It's like, well, you're going to have to just take it easy in essence. There wasn't any specific scenario of what you could or couldn't do. Unfortunately, in both cases, they pretty much said, yeah, there's no restriction whatsoever on eating. And and one would think, the interesting thing is that I've lost my taste and smell, which a lot of people thought, well, maybe you had COVID, because that was obviously part of the COVID experience. But no, it's a normal part of the brain surgery, is that I lost all of my sense of smell and taste, and still haven't gotten it back. And that one would think, oh, what a great time then to lose weight. Well, I got to tell you that unfortunately, taste and smell does not equate to hunger, but you still end up with hunger. And then this is the funny thing is, I've got to come up with a business analogy to use for this, but you eat things, and I'll say things at dinner like, oh, this really tastes good. And my whole family will look at me and go, what are you talking about? You can't taste anything. And it's like muscle memory, like when I eat an In-N-Out burger, I know what the taste of an In-N-Out burger is. And so it still somehow satisfies me the same way, even though when I step back and think about it, I can't taste it. So, it's unfortunately in that particular case, here's my business analogy. That particular case, it might be a bad thing that I have this muscle memory of remembering things. But I think that is kind of, how we operate, right? We end up doing things out of habit. And so there are good habits and there are bad habits. And I think part of our challenge in life is making sure we're focusing on the good habits, which from an eating perspective, I will say I haven't maybe done that good of a job with. But
Yeah, so I mean that is wild to me. So you still get cravings for the things I guess you ate pre-surgery, just because you can almost imagine the taste in your head?
yes, isn't that funny to think? And again, I would have. I wish I could have had the opportunity to tell you that. Yeah, and so therefore, I've only been eating cardboard and granola for the last 3 months, and I'm a physical specimen. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But you do. I won't say that it's necessarily that I get a specific craving for like In-N-Out burger or feta cheese or whatever it might be. Um, because again, it's more that I just get hungry, right? And then obviously the rest of the family is eating, and we've got stuff in the cupboards and all that kind of stuff. And really the only two tastes that kind of exist for me is a little bit of sweetness, bummer, and a little bit of salt, bummer. So those are the two things that probably they tell you not to do too much of. The two that I'm living with. But hey, you know what? It's overall, again, it's a pretty small price to pay. I'm very blessed to have gone through this and really been able to still be back and help the industry and help our system in particular, and to grow and try to make some choices and decisions of how to survive this tough time we're all in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this year again has been so tough for everyone, and I find myself sometimes thinking about not what went wrong, but sort of like reminiscing about life pre-COVID. And I still think I sort of kick myself for having those thoughts because I know I've been luckier than a lot of people have over the last year.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm blessed from the standpoint that I already worked from home, right? My company is based in Florida, but I work in California and live in California, and so I was already set up, right? I mean, my whole world was set up in a virtual basis before the COVID situation hit us. So in that regard, I was prepared for it maybe better than a lot of others. But when you of course now start looking at this, and I certainly think we're seeing a much bigger light at the end of the tunnel than we have in months, and very optimistic about what's going to happen in the future. But as you go through this, obviously there are those days you just get so frustrated, and it's the ups and downs of the news and everything else that we get of what's going to happen. But you also get to the point, as one of my favorite songs to sing is, you're counting your blessings, right? When I get worried and cannot sleep, but you really do go to a point of saying, okay, this has been rough, but I think in some ways it's also made the maybe what we thought were the smaller blessings in our life become even more important, right? You hear this in all kinds of interviews around, wow, I've reconnected with my family more. I've taken more time to really think through my schedule and think through what I want out of life, and then the things that you miss, that were kind of taken away from us. You think, wow, okay, a dinner in a restaurant without a mask on.
Yeah.
I just took for granted as something we do and never have any kind of, and now it's like the coolest thing in the world to be able to think about going into a restaurant and sitting down and eating, right? Who would have thought?
I think about, or it might a few months before COVID, and there was one night when my older sister had tickets to a Broadway show in New York, and I just couldn't make it. It wasn't because I had anything particular planned, but I was just very busy at the time. And now I think about that, and I just think about how outrageous that would be now if I had the opportunity to go to any kind of play in New York, regardless, off Broadway, on Broadway. I think I would jump at that in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, you just you don't want to miss things now, right? I
No,
mean, you don't
exactly.
know when things are going to go away, and based on your choice or not your choice, and so I think and of course that experience, Dan, you just shared, I think is a perfect indication of what's going to happen in the travel industry, right? Is that we all had trips planned. Obviously us in the industry had a number, but all of our consumers had trips planned. Now there's the pain of the cancellation and the refunds and the rebookings and all that. But setting that aside for a second, is that at the end of the day, people just missed things that they were planning on doing. And then they missed all of the anticipation of those trips, and they missed all that is still there. There's still extraordinary anticipation. There are the desire to experience more out of life and all those things, and travel is so perfectly poised to deliver that. And none of us know the when, and we don't know to the extent, but I got to tell you, when it happens, I think it's just going to be extraordinary what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think about all the weddings that either didn't happen,
Oh,
had to be postponed, or happened on a small scale. And there's all those honeymoon trips, there's anniversary trips, there's people. I mean, I can't imagine turning 21 during COVID after dreaming
oh,
about celebrating that milestone for so many years, and then having that kind of taken away from you. I do think I mean, it feels, even in New York, it feels like this summer is going to be a very big boom time.
yeah, I think it's coming, and again, it's a matter of knowing when, which we don't know, but it will come. And you're right. I mean, there's no doubt. Again, no matter how deep we look, we can always find someone else that we think, oh, that would even be worse, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm like you. I think, man, senior in high school, senior in college,
Yeah.
those are just times my hat is off to those people. And in some ways, they didn't know what they missed. I mean, if you've never been a senior in high school, you don't know what you missed. I mean, you watched it a little bit ahead of you, but
Yeah.
those folks that had to go through this in this year, I just have a very different experience that will, again, I think I'll go back to my earlier statement. It'll probably bond them, and probably, through that adversity, create a very unique, set of results from the adversity they go through. But yeah, those would be a difficult time to go through this.
Yeah. Again, I think I have to do a better job of myself putting things in perspective more constantly than I have before. I think that's important for mental health, and hopefully it's a skill. Hopefully, I know we talk about how bad COVID was, but I think there are some things that are going to hold over from COVID that are going to improve people's lives, and I hope, for me personally, I hope that's one of them.
Well, I do too. I think once again, I think maybe one of the blessings of this whole scenario we're living through is, again, that moment to step back and count them, and then to make plans on how to make sure that you don't miss them in the future, right? I for many years, I taught a program. Actually, it finally is now going virtual, and I don't think that was necessarily specifically a COVID choice. Is just the world that we live in. But I've had the opportunity and the blessing to uh, teach every single master cruise counselor in Australia and New Zealand over the last 21 years. And each year they would do a master's program out at sea, and I had the opportunity to teach that every year for 21 years. So it's kind of cool that all these Australian New Zealanders who really wanted to learn how to sell cruises, et cetera, we're on this program. And I put the program together, and it was actually 18 hours of training that I would do, which was a lot of Scott. And that's that. I had a lot of good content because that's a lot to put up with. But the interesting thing is, of all of the sessions, so of course, I broke it down into everything that makes our business tick, right? So we talk about product knowledge, we talk about marketing, we talk about sales, we talk about customer service. But the two last sessions that I would do were completely non-related, really, in some ways, to our business. The first is time management, which I would make the argument that, again, no matter how much you know about any of those other subjects I just mentioned, and the path to success in many ways is still going to come down to how well do you manage your time. And so I'd talk about different suggestions and ideas about the way to maximize your efficiency on a daily basis, because that is probably the one common thread I could say of success, not only in our business but in just about every business. Is it's not as sexy as some of the other things, like if you learn to sell really well and you become a marketing guru, those things sound really fun and are great, but the reality is it's just how good are you at managing your time. And so talk about that. But the last one I would do is a program that I wrote up a number of years ago, and it was called the five F's, and the foundation for success. And the five F's are basically fitness, finance, family and friends, faith, and fundamentals. And the concept was, and I love this quote. I always use this quote that Henry Ford was famous for saying. Unfortunately, I'm sure he might not be happy he's remembered for this now, but he always said, why is it that I get when all I really want is a pair of hands, I get the whole person. And my point being that we aren't just travel advisors. We aren't just the role that we're in. We bring our personal lives. We bring who we are. We bring our happiness and our satisfaction in life to the equation. So no matter how good you are at any particular skill set, again, if your life is falling apart, you're probably not going to do that well in business, or certainly not be happy with the success that you get in your business. So what I talk about is sit down. There was another quote by Mary Kay, the founder of Mary Kay, who said, it's funny, we spend more time planning our vacation than we do planning our lives. And which is certainly apropos for our business. And you think about that, most people do. They spend hours thinking about where they want to go, what they want to do. And yet you say, well, what are you going to do for the next couple of years of your life? I don't know, well, who knows? I haven't spent a minute thinking about that. So the concept was, you take these five F's, because everything you do and every moment that you spend falls into one of those categories, and you just start writing down, what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? And then figuring out how you can try to make that work. And reach the goals that you have for any of those five. So it ended up being kind of the highest rated part of the whole class, even though it really was not what they signed up for per se. So kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. I think part of that is that people, it just seems like too big of a question sometimes. I mean, that's when I remember when I would get tutorials of how to interview when you're going to job interviews, you would have to prepare for that question, where do you want to be in 5 years? And all those answers, to me, it seemed like I had to manufacture an answer. Like I had to have something ready. I couldn't just answer, because like in a moment, it would seem like too big of a question to have sought out. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years? Mm-hmm. But I guess other people have different takes on that.
Yeah, and I don't, again, obviously none of us have that kind of crystal ball. And, of course, if anybody asked us that question 5 years ago, we would have 100% lose factor, right? I mean, everybody would not have put down, well, in the middle of a pandemic 5 years from now, it just, wouldn't have happened. So for me, it's not a matter of really just the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan. Certainly that can be powerful, and people do that. It really is just looking at even tomorrow, right? It's not, oh, I got to think this far in advance. It's really just, we all have those 5 elements of life, right? And the probably one of the biggest misnomers that's out there, I think, is the term balance, right? And oh, you got to balance your life between this and that, or this and that, or any of those 5. It's never a balance. I mean, it's, we think of the scale, right? And that, oh, I want to do this exactly. It's never going to be that way, because you put more time into, I lumped kind of the career side into the finance side just because I love alliterations. I want to use the letter F, but the amount of time you spend working is going to be more than the time you spend pursuing your faith, or doing fitness, right? If you unless you're a full-time professional, you're probably not working out 8 hours a day, right? And so it's not a balance, but it's really just getting those pieces to the extent that you want them, and the importance of them to you. And there's no right or wrong answer, which is the beautiful part too, right? Is that each person is going to say, wow, the most important one of those for me is this. And you can't argue with them. That's their life. But then once they say that, then they can start designing kind of how they want to live to live that out. And so again, I've found that's and actually, my family, we have every year, at New Year's, we sit down and go over the 5 F's with everybody in my family, and everybody shares, well, this is where I'm struggling a little bit. I need spend a little time here or there. And it does give you that reflection. And I think we are in that time of reflection now, of that this is maybe forced that issue.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like a mandatory thing now, being able to think about where you are, and I guess what's important to you too, because we've lost so much over the last year. Again, this goes back to perspective, I think, is being thankful. Like, I'm very thankful my family, we weren't impacted by COVID on a personal level. I mean, and at this point, my parents are fully vaccinated, so I have no fears going to see them every once in a while, So I do feel very thankful. But one thing I want to ask you about, because you mentioned it a couple of times, you mentioned athletics and you mentioned fitness, and I'm curious. I mean, I guess pre 2020, I mean, what was your sort of fitness of choice, or your fitness routine, and why was that important to you?
Well, I'm an old football player, and then went through some other sports over the years, and it's funny, you go through various things. I mean, I did weightlifting and running for years and years and years, and a number of years ago, one of my best friends, actually, that I went to kindergarten with, that I still ski with every year, is about twice my size. The guy's just this monster of a human being,
Wait,
right?
you're pretty tall on your own, though. How tall are you?
Yeah, I'm 6'3" and pushing 285 pounds. So I'm a big boy.
And what position did you, when you used to play football, what position did you play?
I was center and defensive guard. Yeah, at the time. And but I will tell you also, when I played college ball, I only played 1 year of college ball, because in high school I was the big kid. And you get into college, oh my gosh, they're all twice my size, 4 times faster, smarter, everything. So I wasn't like Rudy in the movie. I got the crap beat out of me, and I was ready to say, I'm done. I'm not. So only 1 year of that, and I moved on. But this buddy of mine, who was just this huge guy, told me, oh, I've totally gotten into hot yoga. Well, I got to tell you, I laughed out loud, and this was probably 6-7 years ago. And I started making fun of him and picturing him with his toes in his ears, and it's just like, okay. And after about a couple of years, I'm watching him, and he's like talking. I'm telling this guy, I totally got into it. So I jumped in, and really did yoga on a regular basis. And I will tell you, that's been a kind of a difficult aspect, because I got into a really good habit. And while I know, again, in my head anyway, I can say, oh, yeah, yoga is great because you could just put on a video and do it in your own home. You can, but it's a different level of discipline than when you can go to an appointment and have somebody tell you what to do for an hour. And that works for me. And that having that shut down has been really hard for this whole year. That probably was from a physical, you asked about the fitness side. From a fitness side, that's probably been the most frustrating part, is because that was what I've ended up with in the last few years as my workout, as my way to stay in shape. And so unfortunately not been available. So I'm looking forward to that coming back.
Yeah, I got dragged to one hot yoga class in my life, and it was too humbling for me. Like, cause I like to lift weights too, and like that's sort of an ego booster. It helps your fitness, but it's certainly something that helps your ego as well. And going to the hot yoga class, I could see older elderly women around me just not having a difficult time, and me just. I remember the instructor told me, she's like, if you need to take a break, you can take a break. And I haven't had the gall to go back to another hot yoga class since.
That's a really good point. I think there is as much of a mental difficulty getting through it, because there's no doubt in almost every class that I go to, first of all, I'm one of the only men in the class.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, if not the oldest, I'm one of the oldest, and I'm always the biggest. So, it's like I've got these three strikes against me the minute I walk in. And I also, and this might be a little TMI, but I'm a big sweater. I mean, I sweat, even if it's 42 degrees outside. So you put me into a hot yoga room, people are putting up dams around me, and and the river starts to flow. And but you know what? I got to tell you, you are 100% right. It is incredibly humbling. You go there, but the beauty of yoga, and why I like it, is that while the person next to you is twirling around on their toe and sticking their knee in their ears, and doing it with ease, while you're trying to just reach over and touch your knee, no one cares, right? It's like everybody's on their own and doing their own thing. So but you're right, it's a humbling experience, but it really it certainly works for me.
Yeah, and I mean, so going off what you said before about your plan, and I wanted to ask you this because I was talking to Jennifer Wilson the other day, and we spoke about her career, and she had a direct line to the travel industry with Valerie. And she's sort of taken that and run, and she's sort of this force in the industry now.
Yeah.
But your line to the travel industry wasn't as direct at all. And you mentioned, I guess you were playing football was it at University of Nevada, Reno, right?
It was, yeah. That's where I came from. Yeah, and Jennifer's fabulous, and again, you're right. In many ways, probably our line couldn't be more opposite, because I grew up in kind of your standard, I'll say suburban of the 60s and 70s, and the longest and biggest trips we ever took were in the back of a station wagon. You pile the kids in there, you roll around, you scream at each other, and you go a couple days in a car, and that was really it. I mean, I think I'd gone to 3 states by the time that I graduated college, right? And I think I stepped foot one day in Canada when I went to Victoria on a ferry, but that's it. And there wasn't any burning desire for me to do more. It was just what we did, and it was really most kids that I grew up with. A kid who went even to another state was considered like, oh wow, and of course Europe was just not even thought of. So it was just not something that I thought about, and that went all the way through college. And then it was after college that actually I had a couple of my buddies who graduated a little later than I did started calling me saying, hey, we're going to do the backpack through Europe thing, and I really didn't even have a clue what that was or any burning desire, but they kept saying, if you don't do it now, you don't do it now. And I kept saying no. I'd gotten into real estate at that point, and I was actually doing pretty well, and business was just starting to take off. It's a momentum business, like somewhat like the sales business of travel. And I ended up taking a 3-month leave of absence. They finally convinced me, and I thought, all right, I'm going to take a 3-month leave of absence from my real estate business and do this travel thing with a couple of buddies. Well, I ended up coming home 3.5 years later, Daniel. So
oh my God. Wait, how did you spend 3.5 years when all you brought was a backpack to Europe?
Yeah, well, and then for those 3.5 years, I didn't live out of much more than a backpack, quite honestly. But it was a very long story, but I'll give you the short summary. Is that we ended up, probably spending about 5-6 months in Europe, kind of, just doing the typical backpack through Europe, and started looking for work. Well, through again another fairly long story, but kind of a fun one. I ended up landing as a GO for Club Med. We ended up myself and one of my buddies ended up getting hired right in the Paris office as 2 arrogant Americans walking in and saying, "Hey, you got any jobs?" And didn't even know what Club Med was, quite honestly. Had no idea, what Club Med was compared to any other hotel or anything else. And they hired us, and I was sent to the first club I went to was Dominican Republic, Punta Cana, and of course the fascinating thing there is that was when it was the only resort in all of Punta Cana. So if you can imagine that, there was one resort, and it was Club Med. And now Punta Cana, of course, is like Las Vegas. There's a million of them, but was there for a little while, and actually was a bartender, and then but the Club Med philosophy is to use their people in entertainment. And my background, actually, one of my degrees is in opera performance, and so I became known as a singing bartender. And once I became known as a singing bartender, they then decided they wanted to put me in entertainment, so they sent me to Spain for a training program that frankly was all in French, and so I didn't have a clue what I was listening to or doing. But I went through that, and then I said, gosh, if you're gonna use me as entertainment director at one of your clubs, you got to send me to an English speaking club. So I'm looking through and thinking, okay, good. So that's Caribbean, Tahiti, Mexico. Those would be the three, so I'm looking and waiting. Phone call comes. Yep. Okay. You're hired. You're set. You're going to be entertainment director, and you're going to be going to Mauritius Island. And I had no idea where Mauritius Island was. So I remember, and again, this is pre-internet days, so I had to go to the Atlas, and I started looking in the Caribbean. I didn't even go to the index. I went to the Caribbean and started looking for Mauritius, and I'm like, no clue. Finally, I'd go to the index, find it on the east coast of Africa. Literally, you could drill a hole from California, it'd be the other side of the world. And went there as entertainment director there, and it's still one of my favorite places on earth. Was there for about 7 months, then went to South Africa, and was just going to tour, but then ended up getting a job as a PE teacher. I was a teacher in Africa for a little over a year and had an amazing experience living there. And then came back and decided to try to become a movie star, and moved to Los Angeles. And obviously that didn't work so well, because now I've been in travel for 40 years. So so there gives you a story.
Yeah, I've heard the Club Med story, Scott, but I've never heard that. I don't think you've ever told me, at least, that you tried to get into showbiz in Hollywood.
Yes, that's the career definitely stalled in that regard. But the best news is that I found my bride, and my bride was also pursuing theater, and we met in a performing group down in Southern California, and then actually right after we got married, ended up buying one of the first franchises in travel of a cruise only travel agency, and never been on a cruise. Literally took a honeymoon on a cruise 2 weeks before we opened our office to sell nothing but cruises as a couple of 25-year-old kids. And it was really what got me started in the business at that many, and because I had a love of travel, and the only reason I chose cruise is because I thought the business opportunity was really good. And so we fell into the cruise business, and been in the cruise and travel side ever since.
I mean, again, when you spoke about reflection earlier in the conversation, and I think I had this conversation with Jennifer too, but I mean, do you ever think back and your path is just such a unique path that so many things had to turn the correct way, or you had to take the right left or the right intersection here and there, and you ended up in the place you are now. And I'm wondering, do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about, I don't want to say the breaks, because I think successful people a lot of times, it's not really breaks, it's due to hard work. But do you ever think about the circumstances that led to you sort of sitting here and talking to me right now?
Oh, absolutely. Again, it's funny to think that first of all, I've been in the industry and in the business now for, again, almost 40 years, which while certainly I've had a lot of different roles and worked for different companies and own my own businesses and different scenarios. And of course, as we all kind of know, once you get in travel, it's really hard to get out. And the bug did bite me, obviously, from my European trip on. Travel was still was definitely in my blood, and always will be, and always has been. But it is interesting when you think back about that. I think we can all look back and say there were certain decisions that we made in our lives that completely changed the trajectory of our lives, right? And when you talk to most people and say, what were those biggest moments in your life, most people will say things, which is certainly true for me too, is it's usually marriage, right? The marriage, and then kids, right? Of the moment that you have your kids, and those were incredibly important to me. And certainly there is a choice element involved with both of those, but there's also decisions that you make along the way that you look back and you say, wow, if I didn't make that decision, what would life have looked like? And sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big. And in most cases, though, I think they were decisions that you didn't think were that life changing at the time, right? I mean, it's like, again, when I decided to go with these buddies of mine, it was a 3-month thing. The hardest thing was like, oh, I got some business things I got to deal with, but okay, 3 months. And of course, when you're 22 years old or 21 years old, 3 months is huge. Like, oh my God, 3 months. Wow, what am I gonna do? Now it's like, yeah, I can, 3 months is no big deal. But so I will say that, sometimes the decisions that change your life and make your life is that what you think back and you think, oh, thank goodness I didn't know then what I know now, because I may not have made that choice that led me down the path that I'm on now, right? And because I didn't know any better. And I think about, again, owning the cruise only business. I think back and I think, what was I thinking? I mean, I bought a business. I've never owned a business, basically never been on a cruise. I didn't know squat about any of this. And yet just jumped right in, right? So I think we all get a little bit more cautious as time goes on. So sometimes those early decisions, when you don't have the fear factor, are the ones that really will guide your life. And so there was definitely a few of those. I'm like, wow, okay, that was a pretty major turning point in life.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think I'm far enough. Like, I think hopefully I have more years to go before I start doing that same kind of reflection on my own life. But I mean, I think about that all the time too, because I do think it is the small decisions that can change things very, very quickly. And I think 2020 for me was spent making sure I don't take things for granted, and I think that's one of the things I need to keep in my mind too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, obviously with age you have more things to reflect upon, I guess I'll say. But you do look back and it becomes more obvious in terms of what the real turning points were. But I think, again, you get that perspective also to really focus on what's important. And again, luckily I was always to keep my faith and my family really strong and never falter. And that's led to a lot of blessings in my life, and certainly a lot of adversities became blessings when they were all said and done because of that, right? Of those parts of what I decided early on to focus on. So I'm blessed with an amazing bride, and that now we entertain our grandkids, but that's about as far as our entertainment skill goes.
Well, I don't want to take up a lot more of your time. I know it's 3 hours before me where you are. But I mean, I'm curious. I mean, from where you're sitting now, what are your plans the next few months? What are your expectations? Is there anything you're particularly looking forward to? Anything on the docket that you're looking forward to, or anything you're anxious to sort of put in the calendar and get ready to do something?
Yeah, as we transition here from talking about the past to the future,
To
right?
the future, yeah.
And this, I think, again, there's no doubt that all of us at some point are going to look back and go, what happened different pre and post the COVID year, right? I mean, I think that will be a reflection moment that everybody that's experienced this year is going to have, no matter their age. And for me, obviously, probably the most obvious one, both being in our business, but also just because of the lifestyle that I've had my whole life, is getting back on the road. Who would have thought that I would have said I can't wait to get to an airport? It's and not that I never really minded airports. And I've been doing it so long and traveling so much of my life that it's just part of what it is. But it's funny how that has become something that I'm really looking forward to. So I have a lot of travel that is now booked between kind of late April for the rest of the year, because basically I got about a year and a half worth of events and travel and things that were mushing into the back half of this year. So for me, I'm certainly looking forward to that. And it's not obviously just the travel. The part of that, I'd say the vast majority of all that travel, is connecting with travel advisors. Obviously I'm with cruise planners, and my world is really around, helping those advisors. And I've told a lot of people the amazing thing is given that a big chunk of our business, our industry, is not even, sailing right now. I mean, we certainly have, all inclusives and land and all that, but the cruise side isn't even out there. And yet I think, in some ways we've been busier than ever over the last year of projects. And a lot of the projects and things that we're doing are obviously designed so that when travel comes back, we're going to be well positioned. So for me, what excites me, and I've been doing this for the last 25, 30 years of my career, is teaching and helping travel advisors and trying to help them position themselves how to be more successful as the future comes. And I certainly don't have a crystal ball of saying this is exactly what the future is going to look like, but I think it has allowed for, just like we're talking about, the reflection of what is a travel advisor, and then how is that advisor moving forward going to be successful in the future. And I think a lot of people have said, and I certainly agree, that okay, the value of a travel advisor is now more accepted and is going to become even more important and more valuable to the consumer moving forward. I think that almost I'd say that, okay, so that's a given. Now let's say that, but the reality is you still have a lot of competition. Yeah. We can all say that, but that doesn't mean all the direct teams of all the suppliers are going to go away tomorrow. No, actually, they're going to be as strong as ever. They're going to be there. You've got all your other competitors that are out there that believe the same thing, right? So you've got a lot of people who are ready to pounce on the opportunity. So the question now is, why should a consumer use you? And I've been asking that same question for really 25 years and then some. Is consumers going to ask it, whether they ask it out loud or not, why should they do business with you? And so again, what excites me and I love to do is to help agents find the answer to that question and how to position themselves moving forward.
Well, Scott, I really can't thank you enough, not for just this conversation today, but it's always been a real pleasure talking to you. And you used to be on our board. I used to look forward to those meetings with you. I still look forward to the meetings now. But I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you had a hectic few months, but hopefully when you're on the road, if you're ever in New York, let me know. And hopefully otherwise we bump into each other at some point over the next year or so.
Well, I hope so. I'd love to serve on your board again. That was a great experience. You've got a great team there, great people that do a great job. You've done a great job with this program. I think, again, the probably the most overused word that we have in I think probably in the world, not just our industry, but you can't help but use it as pivot, right? I was like, how did you pivot during COVID? What was the pivot? Which, by the way, just as an aside, I told you I'm an athlete, but I grew up playing basketball and I've always been terrible, just terrible. And, I think back about how long it took me to learn how to pivot without, getting called for walking in the basketball court. That's why I kind of cringe every time somebody says, well, I'm going to pivot. Like, did you know how long it took me to pivot? It was the worst thing for me to learn. Like, you have to find another word. In any case, you guys have done a great job with the pivoting, I think personalizing also the industry, through interviews like this, through, just getting to know folks, because that's what this business is all about when it's said and done, are the people and the relationships. And so, I wish you guys the best and just ask you to continue to plug along. And it's great to again, see what you've done with this program and others that you guys are doing. And, we're all in essence in the same business of helping each other become more successful and to get the best life and lifestyle we can as we move forward. So thank you, Daniel. Really been a pleasure.
Well, again, thank you so much. And I'm hopefully, again, in a few months, I'll be able to shake your hand and we could share some kind of drink in the future.
Amen.
All right, Scott, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And hopefully I'll touch base with you pretty soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Take care.
Take care.